The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to Coffee and Cinema, part of the Secrets of Movies and TV Shows podcast. I'm Dom Bettinelli.
And I'm Father Chip Hines.
So, hi, Father Chip.
Hello, Dom. How are you?
I'm good. So, we've just come out of the theater where we saw the new movie Midway.
Yes.
We are not at the midway point of the movie, though. We're at the end of the movie.
The movie is over.
We just got our coffees at Cafe Nero, which we both agreed were a little lighter than usual. Not as much coffee in the cup. As
a lot of foam.
A lot of foam. And now we're going to discuss our thoughts on the movie. Now, we usually do a spoiler-free, spoiled discussions.
Right.
But this is about a historical event.
Yeah, there's really, I think this happened, and people know about it.
Right.
So there's really no, I don't think we can spoil it. You know what I mean?
I think if you are spoiled by the events of the Battle of Midway, you probably didn't
pay attention.
You didn't pay attention in school.
Yeah.
And you need to hear about it. So.
Yeah, so you're going to hear it from us.
And frankly, because I knew the events of the Battle of Midway, it didn't change how I felt about the movie.
No.
So we'll just get right into it.
Yeah.
And then after we're done, we'll wrap things up and head out. So let's talk about it. So it's a movie about the Battle of Midway, which is
events leading up.
And events leading up to. That's actually the interesting part. It starts with this encounter, this meeting between a naval officer and Admiral Yamamoto. I was mixed up with Yamato, which is the battleship.
Right.
With Admiral Yamamoto in 1937, before the war.
Right.
When this officer Layton, who plays a key role in
is a real guy.
Yeah, a real guy. I should mention, every character in the movie is a real person.
Right.
As far as I could tell, there were no composite characters. There might have been one or two. But all of the major characters were real people, and it depicts the real things that happened.
Absolutely. It's amazing, too.
Yeah.
So this guy, Layton, meets with Yamamoto, and they have a discussion about war.
Right.
And, and he's been like the naval attaché there.
Yes.
And so he has an understanding of the way this guy thinks, and he has a way of just understanding the idea of war. And Yamamoto was very open and wise with him, I thought. And, was just like, this is, this is what's going to happen.
Yamamoto famously said, that America is a sleeping giant. Yeah. And if we don't defeat them within 6 months, we will lose.
Right.
Which was the genesis of the whole Pearl Harbor idea, which was strike a fatal blow right off the bat, send us back to the West Coast.
And they messed up.
Right.
Because they didn't hit the oil tanks and the oil depot, and they didn't hit the carriers.
Right. The carriers were not in port. I mean, and frankly, it's a miracle.
It was luck.
It was, miracle or luck. It was divine intervention.
I hope it was divine intervention.
Yeah. That our carriers were not in port. And there were only 3 carriers, I think, in the Pacific at the time, American carriers. And Enterprise, I think, was headed to port that day and only arrived later that day. If things had happened just slightly differently, the outcome of the war would have been far different.
Could have been different, yeah.
See Amazon Prime's Man in the High Castle.
Which I don't watch, but I've heard is very good.
Yes. In that it shows an alternate history where the Nazis and the Japanese won the war and split America between themselves.
Right.
So it starts with this encounter. We kind of get the idea that Yamamoto is a moderate who's trying to prevent war. And he sort of warns, again, this is historically accurate. Japan is a world power, but is dependent on oil that they get from the United States.
Right.
And if the United States want to avoid war, don't mess with their oil supply.
Right. Which
makes sense.
Makes sense and good advice, yes.
Well, except, eventually, that's sort of gambling that the very warlike nationalists would not eventually turn their attention to the United States, which they probably would have done.
Of course they would.
Yamamoto's saying, give us moderates a chance.
Right.
So, it's a little bit of hindsight there. Should we, shouldn't we have? I mean, it worked out for us in the end.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, but it was an interesting way to begin the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it lays the historical context out, and I think that's always good in these kind of historical movies because, the things we know now about what happened back then are so vastly more than they knew,
right.
Say in the 50s or 60s.
Or even the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, we have all this information and we have all these kind of, records and everything that are kind of not classified anymore. And, in people's own, writings about what happened.
Right.
So, we have a lot of strength in the history and, it's interesting to watch that unfold. You mean, what's going to happen, right? We're sitting there and you and I both know Pearl Harbor is going to get attacked.
Right. You know what happens at Pearl Harbor. We know what happens at Midway.
Right.
We know we win the war.
Right.
But the question is what happens to the people?
Right. And I think that's what this movie, captures very well is this was about the people that fought the war. Right. And
the men on the line in the planes. And let me tell you, I mean,
talk about brave.
Like
those were crap boxes.
the scenes where they're in the dive bombers, dive bombing through anti-aircraft fire and flak.
Oh,
like holding the course.
Yeah.
Watching guys around them get killed.
Right.
And they nevertheless
finished the mission.
Dropped the bomb and did what they had to do.
Yeah.
I mean,
brave men.
I mean, the ability to not just run away.
Right.
And some of that's depicted, like guys who are like, I'm losing my nerve. I can't.
Yeah.
And like, there was a scene which was reminding me very much like the Henry VIII Shakespeare's. Not eighth, Henry V Shakespeare's, where the St. Crispin's Day speech.
Oh, St. Crispin's Day, yeah.
That whole in years to come, you will look back at this moment and know that you held the course. If you can go back out there now, you will look back on this day and say, I can do anything.
Right, and that's basically what happened with one, with what was it, Best?
Yeah,
Best,
Dick Best.
Dick Best and his backseat guy.
Yeah,
and Murray. And so he has that conversation with him, and Murray's like, "Okay, let's go."
Yeah,
and and they did. Right. And they went back out, and you could tell. I mean, they had just come from a battle.
It was bad,
and it was a bad battle. And then all of a sudden they had to go back out again, and with very little, break. Okay, we're gassing up the plane, we're putting another bomb on, and we're going.
Exactly.
It's like, oh my gosh. And the planes, and in the Japanese, officers even said it at one point in the movie, brave men, terrible planes.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine if we had the upgraded equipment that we eventually did have?
Right. The planes we had at the beginning of the war were pretty bad. In fact, they didn't get into it, but the planes that were on Midway were really old.
Right.
They were even worse than the planes that were on the carriers.
Right.
But that was one of the things that they talked that they kind of came out was how the cost of the battle. Like we won, but like
at what cost?
But so like there were whole squadrons that never came back.
Right.
I mean, it was really heavy cost to the Americans.
Heavy human cost.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing that was very interesting to me was the Japanese side. This is a joint American-Japanese movie production. And so you had a lot of the Japanese perspective, and there was no sense of
we're evil.
Right. That they were evil guys. The movie was dedicated to the American and Japanese sailors.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point, Dom, because the Japanese were not. Did they have a pact with Germany? Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
But I think in general, most of them, I think, were just regular guys.
They're patriotic,
honorable guys who were going to do their job because they were told to do it.
Right.
And they were fighting, an honorable war.
Right.
I mean, they weren't fighting it like the Taliban does today. They fought under the.
Well, some obviously did not, like the whole stuff that they did to the Chinese.
Right.
Some of the really bad stuff.
But they didn't look at the Chinese as people.
Well,
you know what I mean? It's a whole different.
The Nazis didn't look at the Jews as people too.
I know.
So there were some people. It's like the point being, not all the Japanese were bad.
Right.
And so they didn't turn them into cartoonish characters.
Right.
Here.
They weren't twirling their mustaches.
Which is like the movie Toro years ago.
Right.
Was also a joint American-Japanese production.
Right.
I was telling you after it came out, I think some of the I think the guy who played Admiral Nagumo in this was Admiral Nagumo in that movie too. I mean, this guy has been around a long time. But the cool thing is like, so those movies, I mean, that was Henry Fonda. That was decades ago. That was like 30, 40 years ago.
No, I thought this was excellent because it was fair.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, obviously it spent a lot of time on the Americans. And that's fine. I mean, it's obvious that we won. So yeah, they're going to have that on there. And I thought they portrayed the Americans well too. Just
very
patriotic guys who needed to do their job. And
there was no sneering. There was no like.
The only one thing was when he dropped that bomb near the end and blew up that carrier, and he just, this is for Pearl Harbor.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
That was a little over the top. But
it was a little bit, but you know, his character was like they played up the cowboy thing.
Right.
I think some of the characterization was a little bit over the top.
Probably.
In a movie like this, you're not going to get these great long story arcs. This is very different from Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor movie.
Yes,
which was all like, you know, this love story with a war movie packed onto the back.
This was a war movie.
This was a war movie. I mean, you had some wives who showed up at different points in family.
Mandy Moore.
Mandy Moore is the wife of the lead there, and but this was a movie about this battle. In fact, it was made in cooperation with the U.S. Navy.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, the Navy has actually been promoting, I noticed, this movie as being accurate.
That I did not know.
And so they it's a very patriotic movie. It doesn't apologize for American patriotism.
It does not.
And so for that, I really grateful.
There was one scene, I think, that got me. I was starting to get a little irritated, and it was this scene where that one guy said he lost his nerve and he couldn't go out.
Right, the young pilot.
The young pilot.
Yeah.
And he was like, I can't do it. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the greatest generation.
Well, but there were guys who said that.
Apparently so. But it was hard to watch.
Right. The thing is what's important is, as I say, bravery is not having no fear. Bravery is facing your fear and going out anyway.
Yeah.
And he did. He did.
In the end, he did.
I mean, Bess turns to him and says, I don't have the luxury of being able to do anything about your lack of confidence. But then he Bess thinks, okay, I'm the leader now.
Right.
He says, you're my wingman. I'm going to watch over you.
Right.
And, you know, we see what happens.
Yeah.
There's some things that are kind of predictable. Like there's the one guy who's like,
it's my last day in the service.
Yeah, I'm going home.
I'm going home to see my family.
We know what happens to that guy.
he might as well have had a red shirt on.
Well, he looked nervous getting into the plane. If you notice, like,
I know.
Something bad's going to happen. No, everything's fine.
No, everything's fine.
Yeah. It was really good. The effects were good. We were talking about, like, you know, how much of that was real and how much was. I mean, the ships looked great. The planes looked great.
Everything did.
Yeah. We had like the submarine, the USS Nautilus.
Yeah.
And all of the things that you see on the screen. Because just as a sort of background, as a kid in high school, I read a lot of books about the war in the Pacific. I read books about Midway and Pearl Harbor. So I knew a lot of these names. I recognized a lot of it. All the stuff that happens, all the war events, actually happened.
Right.
So we see the Doolittle raid.
Yeah.
They launched the bombers off the carriers, the Army bombers.
That could be a whole movie unto itself.
It should be a whole movie unto itself. That's if there's a criticism, that's part of it. There's so much packed into this movie.
Right.
I mean, like Aaron Eckhart is on screen. He's a big actor. He's on screen for 10 minutes, at most, as Colonel Doolittle, and that's all he gets because that's all the time they have for him.
Right. I mean, that raid in and of itself, and the aftermath of all that, should have its own movie.
Yes.
And I hope that somebody does it.
Yes.
Even if maybe even this director, Roland Emmerich, if he wanted to do something more with that, I think it would be good because that seems like a story that's not, hasn't been done.
Right.
And I mean, and even at the end, I knew the last Doolittle Raider had died this year.
Yeah.
And they put that up on the screen afterwards. But it was, so it was interesting. Those guys had a certain cachet in American military history.
Oh, yeah.
And they were always seen as,
Doolittle's Raiders were like
big deals.
Those guys never had to buy a beer in a bar.
No, they did not.
Because they flew off those the decks of the carriers expecting never to come home.
Right.
They didn't and
they had a ditch too.
Yeah, they had a ditch. They knew they were going to ditch in
China.
Hopefully in free China.
Yeah.
Because they had to take off early. Most of them had a ditch in either over the water or over occupied China, which was bad.
Not good.
Because the Japanese were very unhappy that they bombed the homeland.
Right. That really irked them.
Yeah.
And it was to the point where at one point during the movie, when there was that one, I don't even remember who it was.
It was Yamamoto.
Is it Yamamoto?
I think so.
Yeah, he's going on, whoa, it's my fault that the emperor was put in place, and I think he was going to kill himself.
Right. He was almost like catatonic. Like,
right.
It was my duty to protect the homeland, and the emperor's life was put in danger.
Right. And they had a really high, thought of the emperor. The emperor was seen as a deity.
Well, yeah. He's seen as the descendant of Amaterasu, I think, their sun god.
Right. So it's, kind of a big deal. I know that the Japanese weren't exactly, what we would consider honorable during the war, in some ways how they treated prisoners, in some ways how they, the civilians, the Bataan Death March, obviously a bad thing.
Right.
I mean, but they weren't, in my mind, they weren't as bad as the Nazis. The Nazis were gassing millions of innocent people for no other reason other than they had a prejudice against them. At least with the Japanese, you feel like there's some honor there. And I don't know if it's because they have a code and everybody knows that there's a code, and I don't know.
It's tricky.
It is tricky.
It feels like
they kind of walk the line.
The Nazi war crimes was a official policy of state,
right?
Whereas the crimes by the Japanese in places seem like more
individual commanders,
decisions of more localized,
right?
Like Yamamoto was an honorable man.
He was, yes.
and his admirals, like they were honorable men,
right?
By and large, there's one scene where one of the captains of the carriers, of the Japanese carriers, decides to go down with the ship. It's his responsibility,
right?
And it's a powerful scene.
It is a powerful scene, especially when they launch those torpedoes, and you're thinking, oh my gosh,
standing on the deck,
watching them come.
Yep.
And that's I have a lot of respect for anybody who serves in the military. I think it's an honorable profession and a necessary one, unfortunately. And I think I think war obviously has changed a lot since World War II.
Right.
There were conventions that they fought under. There were semi-rules that everybody tried to follow.
At Pearl Harbor, the Japanese planes did not strafe civilian neighborhoods, for instance.
Right. So, there was something about that war that was a little different than the wars that are fought nowadays, where seemingly anything goes.
Total war.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that it's come to that, and it's scary because you never know what's going to happen in the world nowadays. But this movie, I thought, well directed, well acted. Woody Harrelson's in it. He plays Nimitz.
Yeah, which is just shocking that Woody is Nimitz.
I know.
Like, he's not old enough.
I know. And the thing is, and you knew it. I didn't recognize him at first, but when he spoke, I said, "Oh, that's Woody Harrelson."
Yeah, exactly. He's got the voice.
Because they had put extra hair on him.
Dennis Quaid's in it as Bull Halsey.
Yep.
You got Luke Evans in it, who's one of the pilots, the carrier pilots. I mentioned Aaron Eckhart.
Andy Moore is one of the wives.
Yep. And then there's this actually one guy, speaking of Man in the High Castle, who in the movie, the TV show, he lives in occupied Japanese San Francisco, who has to kind of bow to the Japanese. And so when in the movie, his character says something to the effect of, well, if we don't win here, we're all going to be speaking Japanese. And I'm like, that's kind of what he does in Man in the White. Not Man in the White Castle. That's a totally different movie.
That's a different movie.
That's a totally Man in the High Castle.
I want to see that movie, though. But someone should write that movie.
Yeah, that would be very funny. The Saturday Night Live skit. You mentioned the direction being good. Roland Emmerich. I'm a little shocked because Roland Emmerich is not known for his restraint.
No.
Look at 2012, for instance. If he can drop a mountain on a city, he will.
Right.
Now, obviously, nothing like that happened in history, but he certainly showed some restraint, more restraint than like Michael Bay did in Pearl Harbor. And I have to say, very well done.
I thought so.
Very well done.
I thought so. And like you say, a lot of it is that CGI, but you have to get it right.
Yes.
And it has to look good.
It has to look good.
It can't look fake. And none of that, like the strafing and the anti-aircraft stuff,
Right.
none of that looked fake. It all looked real.
Yes. And all of the technology, the planes, the tactics,
Yes.
all of that was real.
Right.
They weren't playing with any of that stuff.
Right.
They did things. Things worked the way they do in real life. They did in real life. And the tactics they followed and all of that stuff. And frankly, to get all of what they did, I mean, they had to, of course, kind of compress some or leave stuff out.
Right.
Because you wouldn't be able to fit it all in. But the as much as they got in there was pretty amazing.
Oh yeah.
And because you got a real sense of it, because like the battles between the carriers at Midway, where these planes they don't have radars on them.
No.
And frankly, they're radio silent for most of the time.
Right.
And they're trying to it's like you're feeling around in the dark.
Yeah.
For the other guy, like in a boxing match,
Right.
And some of these planes, they went out, they didn't come back, they ran out of fuel, or they had to. They're at the edge of their fuel limit. They find the enemy fleet and they have to bomb and then ditch the planes. And,
right.
I mean,
I mean, when you think about it, I mean, I have total respect for the guys that fly today, but flying back then was completely different.
Yeah. By the seat of your pants.
Totally by the seat of your pants. There was no missile lock. There was none of that stuff. I mean,
right.
They shot based on what they saw, and if something obscured their view, they missed.
Right. Exactly.
And they didn't have multiple weapons. They had one bomb.
Right. The torpedo bombers had one torpedo. The dive bombers had one bomb.
That's right. That's it.
And then you go back and go get another one.
Right.
It was
totally different kind of warfare and aerial flying tactics but it makes you wonder like how the tactics have evolved too. That's when I watch movies like this, I think to myself, I wonder how much of this is studied in the academies. Like, do they study these battles to see like this is how you can do this and that? I mean, I don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't.
They still. I mean, there's still like history. I mean, they study the Athenian naval battle still. I mean, some things are timeless.
Right.
There are principles involved. Principles like what was Nagumo's big mistake was switching back and forth on the planes to bomb the
right.
base in Midway, and then they get through that and they're like, oh no, change your mind. Rearm the planes to go after ships, which two totally different kinds of armament.
Right.
And then the mistake is because it takes so long, all of that armament is basically on the deck, not in the magazines where it's safely stowed,
right.
but on the deck where one 500-pound bomb would take out the entire ship, which
right.
it did. So there were these mistakes, and the mistakes of arrogance, of assuming Americans would not be able to find out about the plan. I mean, that was another big thing was we broke their codes.
Right.
Not completely, but enough that we knew what was happening.
Well, that was one of the best scenes when, I don't know who was asking. I forget. There were so many people in the movie, and some of them, they didn't get really introduced, but this one guy says, well, I can't go on your guest. You got to tell me something. He gives them like this exact thing.
It's going to be at 7:40 a.m. on June 7th. Let's say 7th. It might have been 4th.
Might have been 4th.
They're going to come on a bearing of 325 degrees and going to be set at 170 miles out.
Right.
And he was off by 5 on each one.
Right.
5 degrees off, 5 miles off, 5 minutes off.
Yeah. and he says, I'll endeavor to do better next time, sir. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. That guy was brilliant. And he knew, he had not predicted Pearl Harbor, but he had a feeling about Pearl Harbor.
He had a strong
sense that it was coming. And he tried to impart that to the commander at that time, but the commander was like, nah.
Did you ever watch Stargate Atlantis?
No.
Okay. Or any of the Stargate TV shows?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember Rodney, the scientist?
Oh, yeah.
Rodney was that admiral who before Nimitz.
Okay.
Which was wild because, again, these guys are older now. They can play these older guys.
That's true.
It's so funny.
True. Yeah. No, but overall, I mean, if you can see this in the theater, I think you should because it's really great on the big screen.
Yes.
And I think, most people have big TVs now. You'll still enjoy it at home, but I think seeing it on the big screen was imperative to me. I really wanted to do that.
Did you notice the average age of the audience watching with us?
Yes, I did.
They were all several decades older than us.
Several, yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, I don't think they were World War II veterans, but they certainly, they were older men who probably served in our nation's armed forces.
Might have been kids around the time of Midway.
Could have been. That was one of the things I kept on thinking, like when they showed the baby or the daughter in the bed.
Yeah.
And I kept on thinking, that's like somebody's grandmother.
That's my mom's age.
Yeah.
My mom was 7 in 1941.
Right.
Pearl Harbor. So yeah, that could have been her.
Right.
Like, at that age.
Right.
Yeah. Pretty amazing.
So unbelievable.
So I think we should wrap it up there.
Yeah, that's a good place to stop.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Coffee and Cinema through their generous donations at sqpn.com/give. They make it possible for us to continue Coffee and Cinema and all the shows at sqpn.com. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Be sure that if you haven't done so, to subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, your favorite podcast app, or at the SQPN YouTube channel, where you should hit the bell to get notifications of new episodes. And also, please share the show with your friends, this and the other shows on the SQPN network. Help us grow our audience and help us grow the community of listeners. The shows are always better the more people who listen to them.
Absolutely.
That is a truism for all podcasts.
And, because we like to get ideas, too. I mean,
we love your feedback.
Yeah.
If you go see the movie, we want to hear from you. What do you think of it?
Yeah, what do you think of it?
Yeah. Or if you don't want to see the movie, tell us why.
Right.
We'd love to hear from you. So you can let us know by visiting sqpn.com/secrets or the StarQuest Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Or you can send us an email to secrets@sqpn.com. Let us know.
Excellent.
So until next time, Father Chip Hines, thank you for joining me for Coffee and Cinema.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the secrets of movies and TV shows on StarQuest.